All right, bows and bow ties. I never want to paint my marriage as perfect, right? um, it got me thinking because earlier this week, my husband really kind of like ticked me off. Now, when I say ticked me off, by the way, if you see steam, hot cup of coffee here. When I say tick me off, I'm not talking about like a knockdown, drag out fight. It's rare that we even have something like that. But he really irked the you know what out of me. You start thinking about all kinds of things, right? So um I was thinking about marriage because it's like times like these when someone like really just like just does something, says something that just really irks you. And it got me thinking to last week. It was on Sunday. I did a video with a friend of mine about perspective after 40. Wasn't too deep, but it was lightweight. It was just to give a slightly different perspective. I'm sure people get tired of seeing me sometimes. So I wanted to ask someone to come on, just speak a little bit about it. But yeah, I was thinking about how, my husband, he really just, I was unhappy with something. So I was lying in bed and I was scrolling through TikTok and I came across a video with Michelle Obama in it. For those of you who are new to my channel, I am the Black opinionated woman, also known as a B.O.W. This is the thumbnail you selected to get into this video. It's just basically a photo of me with a backdrop that says lessons learned. Okay, so look, let me go ahead and I'll do this. That's me. I'm going to put this video on and I'm going to pause. This is just a little short TikTok video. Okay.
By saying this, it's like there were 10 years when I couldn't stand my husband.
You do say that. You say
10 long
10
years. And guess when it happened? When those kids were little, right?
Yes.
Right? Because, you can be all great individually when you're just married. You got your life, he's got his, you come together. It's all, ooh, good to see you, bye, take it easy. And then you have kids.
Not take it easy.
Take it easy, you travel.
Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. I want to talk about these lessons. Let me tell you something. I remember having this conversation with several people. I may have even done a video on this. I remember, I'm going to bring it all together. I remember talking about how I enjoyed marriage until I started having 500 kids. I have 4 children. My oldest has a separate dad. And then I have 3 with my husband. And it was great when it was just one, we were flying off to London, like business class, first class, whatever. Like we were just doing our thing. And everything she says is correct. We were flying off. I had the best of 2 worlds. I had my career. I was married. I was enjoying life. I had my little mini me in tow. When he was hanging out with dad, it was great. And then my husband and I had a child together. And it was fine. It was relatively, I don't want to say seamless. I wouldn't say seamless because when you go from 1 to 2, it's still a lot. But we still were able to travel. I would go visit my husband when I think he had to take a trip to Canada at one point. My husband used to travel a lot. I would just pack up my kids. One time I brought my mom with me, and she was just like, I'll come along. So she was my travel buddy with my children. So we hung out in Canada and Montreal area and good stuff. But then those twins came. And let me tell you, people who had twins gave me some advice about having twins and marriage and everything. And 100% of them said the same thing. They were like, your only job, one person said your job is to survive the first 6 months. The other person said, your job is to survive the first year. And none of these people knew each other. And then one person who had twins said, and this was men and women, didn't know each other, different races. And they said, don't listen to anybody because you're going to have your hands full. You already have two other children and you've got twins, and it's going to test your marriage. And let me tell you, Michelle Obama said it was about 10 years. And I don't know. I was saying definitely for a good 7 or 8 of them. Because it was the hardest thing we went through. It tested our marriage. It tested who I thought I was. It tested our ability to work together. It tested, I mean, we were looking at each other sideways. It got to the point where I was like, I don't even like this dude sometimes. I'm sure he felt the same like me. I went from being highly independent. I was traveling all around the world. I was doing what I wanted to do. I was enjoying hobbies and everything. And I got to the point where I felt like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. And my husband and I were talking past each other a lot because you got to remember, he also had a life before me. And now we were like in the thick of it. And we had to figure it out. So earlier in this conversation, I mentioned that, he had irked me. He had really ticked me off this week. I'm going to bring that up with, let me see, I wrote down notes. It'll come in probably the last point I'm going to make. He ticked me off. Well, maybe the fourth point. The first point basically is we went through a period where we just couldn't stand each other. It's true. That's not to say every marriage goes through that, but we got to a period because we're both two independent people with careers learning how to make it work. Now, let me pause right here because I want to lean into this for a second. There's so many women out here right now who have been messed over, they are scorned, and they have a negative view of marriage. They have a negative view of relationships. And I would say I can understand based on experiences and proximity too. I think the only thing I wish is that they would comment less on marriage when they haven't been in it. Now, when you are in a marriage and you're committed to each other, you're in a covenant, right? It's a lot easier to get into, but much more difficult to get out of. And that's not to say that I have a perfect marriage, but let me tell you, when you're committed to something, it is difficult at times. And there are going to be times when you're looking at your significant other like, you really have me on 10. You got me effed up right now. And hopefully you have more good times than the negative ones. But I know when those kids came along, we didn't have the luxury of just being totally focused on self. It was a lot easier when we had one or two, or whatever it is. And by the way, we love our kids. Like, our kids are a trip. But even when it was down to just my one, I don't think, it required a lot of us, but we were still able to move the way we wanted to move, right? But eventually school age happens and more kids come, and you really need to be stable. You need so much if you're doing your best to raise kids the right way. And what happens is she made that comment. Let me see. Did she go further in? Let me see where I stopped.
Evelyn, that's great. Good. I get to hang out and watch the TV I want to watch.
Right.
But the minute we had kids, it was.
Let me roll it back a little bit for a second.
It's all, ooh, good to see you. Bye. Take it easy. And then you have kids.
Not take it easy.
Take it easy. You're traveling. That's great. Good. I get to hang out and watch the TV I want to watch.
Right.
But the minute we had kids, it was like, where are you going? And how far? And you start measuring. It's like, how many diapers did you change? And oh, you're golfing? Oh, you got time? Oh, you got time to golf? How you at the gym all the time?
Why you in my brain right now? I'm like,
that's when all the measuring starts.
Okay, so it became, we went through a really tough time too, because I know at one point my husband worked for himself for a period of time, and we both were craving that personal space, that alone time, that connection with others. So my husband isn't the kind of person that just loves being around his boys every 2 seconds, right? But when he's around them, they have a great time. They cut up, like those are his people, right? And I'm a little bit more social than he is, so I enjoyed being out and about. I enjoyed being fit. I enjoyed being slim. I enjoyed all of that. And I was able to still do it even when I had kids for a period of time, but it was so much harder because I was less present at home. And I had to make adjustments too as an independent woman who was used to doing her own thing. I had my own hobbies and friends and wants, and he did too. So when we had these kids, and so much of that had to be adjusted. And it's not that we didn't want to adjust and we didn't want to do great things with our kids, but like the fact of the matter is human nature kicks in and it's still an adjustment. And so now the daily in and out of raising kids, and we love them. We wouldn't trade these kids for the world. But there's a part of you that still longs for the freedom, the time, the fluidity of what it was like when you were single. And it's not that you're trying to give up your husband or your children. It's not that. But you do reminisce and you think about all those things. And then what happens is if somebody gets more free time than you, you get to be a little resentful, right? Because really, I was listening to something that Brene Brown said. It's really not so, it's more related to jealousy. He got time to himself. Why didn't I have time to myself? That's what it came down to, or vice versa. My husband was used to, I mean, he's still a high earner, but I remember he would spend money on nonsense. But then we started draining them pockets when we had all these kids in private schools and daycares and the responsibility of running a house. And he had to take care of me at one point because I was home for 3 years, sacrificed stuff in my career. But those kids came along and changed our world. They changed everything. The way we lived was different. We had to think about how we spent money. We went from not worrying about it. I mean, we put away for retirement and stuff, and we had some disposable money, to now we were like, whoa, we need to like align some things. So my husband was like, I gotta be like on a budget a little bit, like, because this is getting expensive when you've got all these children in daycare and private school. It's a lot. But yeah, the kids come along. So that's the first lesson. The kids come along, and what happens is you may not even like your husband for a period of time because you guys are in the thick of it and you're trying to figure it out. You're tired. Your activities change. I mean, you love the kids, right? And now you have to figure out, what does that relationship look like between each other? What does that look like between us? Because the things that we did then is different than what we do now, because we've got these kids that need us. All right, let's go on to the next one.
because you got this project.
Yes.
And guess what? Little kids, they're terrorists. They are. They have demands. They don't
You're
talk.
right.
They're poor communicators.
Yes.
They cry all the time. They're
Yes.
irrational.
They're selfish.
Needy. And you love them more than anything.
Oh.
Okay, so now kids. She called them terrorists, but I think of them as more as little, they troll you for real. Let me tell you something. We in our marriage had to learn more when these kids came along because these kids forced us to be less selfish. When I was single, I didn't have to think about anybody. I didn't really have to check in with anybody. I did whatever I wanted to do. I spent money how I wanted to spend. I chose to make dinner or not chose it. Like I'm using bad language here. I traveled. I engaged in activities. I went to events and comedy shows and concerts. And it's not that I don't do those things now, but it has calmed down so much more. I could get up and go on a light 2-mile run because back then, if I felt like I gained 2 pounds, now this is ridiculous, as I was fit and I was slim, but I wanted to keep it the same. I was like, oh no, I'm enjoying too much. I can go run that off so quickly. I could focus on me, but then the kids came. And when they were going through their growing, it's not always convenient for us. So now my husband and I had to realize that like we had to be less selfish and focus on these kids. At one point, I joined tennis with my twins, right? Like I had the twins, but I joined tennis and I had all these kids. My oldest was in school. My middle child, he wasn't quite in school. No, I think he did eventually. No, he wasn't in school yet. And then I had my twins. And I played tennis for a while. I was in leagues. I put this shirt on for a reason. I went to the national championships. This is a long time ago. Yeah. So my kids, I played for a while with them until they got older, and that no longer was palatable. Can't do it. They had their own music interests and sports and other activities and play dates. And everyone says you shouldn't quit tennis, you shouldn't quit tennis, right? But my husband played a little bit too, and then we realized we can't do that. We even tried to do something together, my husband and I. We even joined a bowling league, had a great time, got my little PBA card and everything. And then we realized this is just not our time right now because we have so many. We have 4. And so if they're all in these different activities, it's just not realistic. So in our marriage, we had to become less selfish. I had to admit I needed more help. And in the last few years, my husband, now check this out for all the women out there who want to go on a marriage and men. My husband realized that I was drowning too. And you know what he did? We changed up our schedule. And look, I'm not saying he's perfect because, he's still on my list right now. We got to resolve this. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. I don't know. I might have my little inner petty still be going. But one of the things he did was he realized he had to help more. He actually started doing all the cooking, took that off the plate for me. To be honest, even though I can make more things, my husband is a better cook than I am. So I'm okay with it. My husband and I had to share more in the duties. It's not always equal, but he's definitely involved. So I'm not here to make this sound like we have a perfect marriage. Like I said, we do not. We have our own challenges and things that we go through in my marriage. But I've learned that when kids come along, I mean, Michelle Obama calls them terrorists. Yeah, they are a time suck. And most parents who are doing it right, they gladly give of themselves, their time, their resources, whether that's money or whatever it is. They give up all these things because they want to support their kids. Now, that may not necessarily be the most balanced thing because we all try to figure it out, especially when you love people who didn't ask to be here. But I will say, when these kids came along, we had to learn how to be less selfish. The problem is, you start learning all of that and then you forget to go back to taking care of yourself. Hence, my thickliciousness now. I got a situation going on. I'm probably like a size 10. So now, look, the first thing I was talking about was you go through a period where you may not even stand your significant other. And then you go through this period where it's like, these kids are trolling me. She called them terrorists. I'm like, they're the biggest time suck. I know they had me questioning my sanity. I'm like, I think my kids are gaslighting me for real. They had me thinking like I was losing it. But all right, let me see. Let's see what else she says.
And so you can't blame them.
No.
Right? Because look, they're cute and he's so cute. And look at him throwing his plate. That's so cute. So you turn that ire on each other.
Yes.
You know, and for 10 years while we're trying to build our careers and, you know, worrying about school and who's doing what and what you know, I was like, oh, this isn't even.
No.
And guess what?
Okay. I definitely felt that way for a period of time, especially when I was a stay-at-home mom, because I wanted to be around with my kids, even though they still went to daycare a little bit. I wanted to try the housewife thing, and I don't think I was all that successful at it. I hated it. But some people enjoy it. I did not. I just want to make that clear. But some people are great at it. I just felt like I failed every day. I had resentment at not being like the best housewife. I had resentment at not being referred to by my name. I was always referred to as my husband's wife. They'd be like, "Oh, you're so and so's wife." "Oh, well, so and so's wife." I'm like, "I have a name." I was resentful because it wasn't so much that I wanted this great career, but I just wanted the option to have my career or to earn money. I liked having agency in myself. It's not that my husband didn't take care of us, but I wanted to earn my own money too. Even though it's our money, it comes into the house. I think it took a hit on my self-esteem. And so what happened was we were both fussing at each other because I'm like, you get all this glory. And I'm like, it shouldn't be a competition. But I felt like I wasn't being heard. So anyway, she's saying that you start turning on each other. I mean, there was a little bit of that, and you work through it. You work through it. Let me tell you, it is not easy. And I keep saying this because I want people to understand that I don't want to make it seem like we have this perfect marriage. We do not. We struggle like everybody else. We struggle like everybody else. There were so many things we had to work through. And I'm just keeping it kind of like, I don't want to say light because I don't divulge my personal business, but it was one of those things where we had to, let me tell you, we had to stop sniping at each other. It was getting really, really bad. It was getting bad. And what happens is, I remember my husband used to get to the point where he would say these reckless things. And as I have a very sharp tongue, but I never used to say reckless things. And so he would say reckless things that would cut. And I was like, if I unleash this tongue, we had to really, it was a good, maybe she's right. Maybe it was 10 years. We had to really, I know it was a good 7 years. I was like, what are we doing? It was rough. And a lot of it centered around taking care of kids. We wanted to give them the best opportunities possible. We struggled. We wanted to give them the best opportunities possible, but it required us also to give up a little bit of something, at least temporarily. And I don't care what anybody says. If you're trying to raise your kids the right way, there's a lot of sacrifice. There's so much sacrifice. A lot of it's based off of this love you have for your kids and this responsibility to the families. Is why is one side like this and the other side's like a tight girl? I don't know what's going on. It's crazy. But anyway, we started sniping at each other. At one point, you would turn on each other like, you know what? I'm so sick and tired of doing these dishes. I think she mentioned it too. I'm like, you get to just work. I got to do all this stuff, like losing it. People value you. People think I'm a ding dong. I remember, let me tell you, just to give you some perspective, I remember people in my fit or finer younger days looked at me as only as like his trophy or something, right? Meaning I was just there and people didn't know for the longest time because I never talked about it. Believe it or not, as insecure as I started to feel, I never spoke about what my profession was. I was at a New Year's Eve party and we were playing a game. We were playing a game. Now there was two things. Let me rewind it back. There were two things that happened at that party. One, we were playing a game, and I forgot what it was, but it was not. It was like a dirty word game or something. I forgot what it was, and you had to write your answers down, and people had to guess who said what, whatever. And I remember it could be dirty or it could be really intellectual, whatever it was. I cannot remember this game. And all of the answers that people thought were like really smart and intellectual, blah, 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 they never thought it was me. And all of the empty, vapid ones, because sometimes people say things just to be silly, because you're just having fun, right? Everybody's drinking and eating, having a good time. And all of the empty, vapid ones, they always thought it was me. And they were always surprised. They were like, oh, you didn't say that? Now, a lot of this was shade. Shade. But I was back at work by then. And the really, I guess, interesting comments that people thought were really interesting, they were so surprised that it came from me. I wound up going upstairs to get something to eat. It was like a snack or something. So we had people who were upstairs and we had people who were downstairs, and it was music and stuff like it was a New Year's Eve party. And it was, it was like all over and musical every year. And I remember I walked into the kitchen. And somehow we got on the topic of what everybody does or whatever, right? Because most of us, we just didn't really talk about it too much. But somehow people were like, oh, so do you work or have you ever worked or something to that effect? And I was like, well, yeah. And they were like, well, what do you do? I was like, I'm an engineer. It was like a collective gasp. You would think the record had stopped, like, like people were like, what, you? And I was like, well, yeah, why not me? Another person there had mentioned that they do something with physics for a living or something. I can't remember because it was a bunch of like lawyers and there's some tech people in there and business people at this party. And they were so surprised. They were like, we would have never guessed, did you? And I was telling them how, like, when I went to college, I started off as a physics major, actually. And so the person who's a physics major, she was like, really? You? And everybody in the room was like, really? I think, and so what happened was during that time, when the resentment came in because people for so long knew me as my husband's wife. And they didn't know me as a functioning member in society, whether you're working or not working. I was just known as my husband's wife. And they never assumed that I had the ability to engage in extemporaneous speech or critical thinking or anything like that, right? And they were so surprised. After that time, I had completely different conversations with people. But for the longest time, no one knew. And I never went in, beating my chest about it. So it was like for a few years. I never told anybody. I'm like, what? So yeah, you give up so much because you're trying to take care of your kids. In the process, I was so frustrated because I felt like no one sees me. And it wasn't so much that I needed them to know I was an engineer. I just needed them to just see me. For some people, it's nothing, but for me, it was important to me. So I would say that third thing was we did start turning on each other. I was resentful because people saw him, but they didn't see me. I was just his wife. Okay. Now, some people will probably take issue with me saying I was just his wife, but I felt like I can be someone's wife and still be seen and still be a person. It wasn't so much that I needed people to give me accolades, but I had been dismissed so often because they made assumptions about who I was, how I thought, what I've done, etc. I never ran down a list of things. So for years, they never even knew. No one cared to ask. All right, so let's move on to this next thing.
Marriage isn't 50-50.
Yeah.
Ever. There are times I'm 70, he's 30. There are times he's 60, 40. But guess what? 10 years, we've been married 30.
Wow.
I would take 10 bad years over 30. It's just how you look at it, right? And people give up for the 5 years. I can't take it.
How
it
do
was
you
bad.
know? What is the, because sometimes
You gotta know your person. Do you like him? I mean, you could be
Right.
mad at him, but do you still look at him and go, I'm not happy with you, but I respect you. I don't agree with you,
Yes.
but you're still a kind, smart person.
Yeah.
All right, so I said that I was going to bring it all together on this fourth point. Like, I'm not happy with you, but I still respect you, and I know you're still a kind person. Let me tell you something. The one thing about my husband, even though he got on my nerves this week, like for real, generally speaking, especially in public, I feel like he does treat people with kindness. The problem is sometimes, like when people who are closest to you, sometimes you forget you got to treat them with kindness too. No, he didn't do anything like, salacious or, uh, whatever. But he did something that I think he was completely unaware of. I'm like, hold up. So I'll say this, even when you're going through it, like she said, oftentimes people just, they give up before, you come through it. And not understanding that, like, sometimes it's like, hey, I like you as a person. I don't like what you did. Um, let's just play that again because it's such a good point. It basically goes back to partnership, I think. Let me go here. Let's rewind that.
Ever. There are times I'm 70, he's 30. There are times he's 60, 40. But guess what? 10 years, we've been married 30.
Wow.
I would take 10 bad years over 30. It's just how you look at it, right? And people give up for the 5 years. I can't take it.
How
it
do
was
you
bad.
know? What is the, because sometimes
You gotta know your person. Do you like him? I mean, you could be
Right.
mad at him, but do you still look at him and go, I'm not happy with you, but I respect you. I don't agree with you,
Yes.
but you're still a kind, smart person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this goes back to, so earlier I just played this clip twice. Talked about it being sometimes it's never 50-50. That is true. So for all the women who are talking about marriage and all these other things, I know they want help and I get it. It is never 50-50, but you have to give 100%. And 100% doesn't necessarily mean he's doing 50% of the chores and you're doing 50% of the chores. There are seasons when someone is going to have to pick up the slack. Okay. So remember I said this past Sunday, I did a video. I recorded a video with a friend of mine, and we talked about the perspective after 40. And in that, in the very beginning, I gave a clip of what was going to happen, what was going to come. And she talked about, and these things we talked about offline, but like she talked about like partnership. And it doesn't look like 50-50 all the time, but you're a team, you're in a partnership together. That was one of the lessons that I had to learn along the way being married. There were times when I was tired and I was like, I feel like I'm doing this. But I remember when he was working really hard to take care of us and I picked up the slack. I remember one time there were some women early on when I had my babies, they were like all young and he was still traveling a little bit. And I was in the thick of it. I was home and it was like, you know. And I remember my husband came back from, I believe it was Thailand. He came home and I didn't meet him at the airport. I had my 500 kids at home. So actually, he had driven himself. I don't remember if he had a service that time. It doesn't matter. Anyway, he gets home and he came in the house, through the garage by the laundry room, and he drops his um, luggage there. And I remember I was telling some friends of mine about that. I was like, that was a preference of mine, actually. And in that conversation, someone had mentioned, you're doing his laundry. He can't do his own laundry. And I paused and I was like, yes, I was saddled with these children, but this man was flying around the world. I know he's exhausted. He's bringing in income to take care of his family. I don't want him taking his luggage upstairs because you just never know. What if you brought back a cootie or something? I was like, leave it there. I'll take care of it. Usually what my husband would do is he would come in, he would leave his his luggage right by the laundry, unless he would take something out of it, like if he had gotten us something, something novel. Or like if he got me like a sweatshirt or something I wanted from some place, or a t-shirt that said Hard Rock, whatever. I used to like try to collect those before they all got like worn out. Anyway, so she was a couple of ladies. They looked at me sideways like, why would you do that? And I'm like, why would I not? I had to learn partnership. And it hit me in that conversation. Like I hadn't even given it much thought. It was something I wanted to do because I'm like, I don't mind doing it. He's coming home. And let me tell you, when you are traveling 24 hours and you have to make multiple stops in like Thailand to Japan or whatever, and you try to get that flight all the way back to the East Coast, we're on the East Coast. Or unless you go from Thailand and skip over Japan or something like that, and maybe land on the West Coast. He didn't really do that too often. I remember when he would have to go to Japan, or if he'd have to go to Thailand, or if he'd have to go to Australia, if he had to go to well, the UK wasn't so bad because I would just go visit him. We even took my oldest, look, my oldest has been traveling since he was a little tight. I don't know. It was a partnership. You learn that. And so when she was saying it's not always 50-50, that's true. So there were periods of time where he couldn't be super hands-on with the kids because he was traveling. He'd be gone for like 2 weeks. He would call me every stop. He would call me every single night. I could tell when he was so exhausted. I'm like, just go hang up. He's like, no, I'm here. I'm here. I am. I'm like, dude, go to bed. It was like back in the old. Remember back in the day, like when you were like, you had friends, or if you had some guy you're interested, and it's like, no, you hang up first. 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 It would be like that. He'd be like, no. He's like falling asleep. I could tell. Like, and even back, well, we used to Skype back then before there was FaceTime, but he would be like, no, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm like, you're literally falling asleep. I just wanted to let you know. He was exhausted. So when he would come home, even though I had these 500 kids, He was basically just stumbling into the house. He was so tired, but then he'd be roided up a little bit because, so his body's all jacked up. The time change was weird. And the least I could do was do his laundry. And he was appreciative. I mean, it wasn't like required. He never asked me to do it. I just did it. It's never 50-50. He felt bad when he was gone. He's like, you're there with all of our kids. He was like, what if something happens? I'm like, well, what if it doesn't? I'm like, don't scare me. But it was tough. There were times when it was just like, it was just rough. When I had the twins, I remember I was so exhausted because they weren't on the same schedule. Let me tell you, don't even get me started. I remember we had a deal during the week. What he would do is he would go to work, he would come home, and I would get from it'd be like maybe 6 to 8. I don't remember what the time frame was, but from 6 to 8 o'clock, I was off duty. I would get in the car and go to Target, even though I had already been there during the day, and just walk the aisles and just touch stuff like a flat out weirdo. I would just go to Target, or I'd maybe go to Walmart, or it was just some place that was closed. I didn't go to like the mall or anything like that. I wasn't really big into malls, but or wherever. It didn't matter. And I would just go so that I could go look at stuff. I would read the covers of books that I've already read 20 times. I would find a new pair of socks. I was like, oh, I've never seen these before. Would be there all the time because I always needed stuff for the kids, even though I had a stash, but there's always something they needed. But he would give me 6 to 8. Well, not so much that he gave me, but you understand what I'm saying? Like it was like, all right, you just go take that time. Half the time, I really only needed an hour because I couldn't fall asleep. I just needed an hour to whatever. Sometimes I was in the house, but I was off duty. So as my kids were getting older, but yeah, especially like my oldest, he'd be like, "Mommy, mommy, mommy." I'm like, "Nope, go talk to well, my husband is his stepdad. So his dad is definitely present. Yes, we have a great relationship, blah, blah, blah. But my son lived with me and my husband. So what happened was, yeah, I got that time off. And I never even took advantage of all of it. But then what happened was the agreement was I would give him, no, it was 10 o'clock. That's what it was. By 10 o'clock, he was off the schedule again. He was off duty because I wanted him to be able to get the rest he needed. My husband needs rest. He is so cranky. If he doesn't get sleep, he is ridiculous. I'm like, you don't have ownership on being tired, because he thinks he has ownership on being tired, by the way. So I would make sure he would have that time to get some rest. Maybe it wasn't the full complement that he was used to getting, but he would get the rest. And so that meant from 10 o'clock on, I'm back on duty. So the children were sleeping, but I had babies and they just couldn't get on the same schedule. So I would have to get up twice in the middle of the night. As much as we tried, just didn't work. So we just stopped trying to force it. You know what it was? You know how exhausting that is? I was pumping. I did not want anybody to latch onto me. So I pumped a ton of milk. You know what my husband would do on occasion, because I was so tired, like I could barely hold like the bottle up or whatever. He would still get up every once in a while in the middle of the night, and he would just take the kids and just go feed them. I was laid out. Where I'm going with this, getting back to that, it's not always 50-50. But if you're given 100%, right? Of course, he didn't take the brunt of all the middle of the night feedings, but he took them when he needed to. With my middle child, he went through a phase where look, I know people are not trying to call. Only my middle child only wanted to be walked around by daddy. I don't know if it was like the smell of daddy, because he was big, he had this deep voice. My middle child, there were times when my husband would have to get up and walk him. For whatever reasons, he would have to walk and rock him to sleep, because for whatever reasons, he was like, I don't want me. He just had to. I don't know. It wasn't always 50-50, but you had to have 100% effort. We had these little agreements with each other, okay? And they weren't perfect, but that's what we did. They weren't perfect. I'm trying to figure out why this what is this side? Like this side is like more curled and this side is just, it's just tacky. Anyway, so we had these agreements with each other, whereas I wanted him to get a certain amount of rest so that he can go be great during the day. He afforded me the ability to be home for a period of time. All right, let's finish this up because it's getting long.
The feelings are going to change over time, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to always be. So the minute that goes, people want to give up on it.
It's true.
But now you're in the work. You're in the work of it. And that's why I want to talk about the work of it, the work of any relationship, the work of friendship.
Okay, so that's that. So yeah, we talked about going through it. So in my conversation with Kelly last week, I talked about, oh yes, we had to do some work. I said there's a period of time when it wasn't like that great. It wasn't that great. I definitely when we were struggling and I was feeling resentment and he was feeling resentment and we were going through it, you know what we had to do? We had to keep putting in the work. And let me tell you, we failed a lot. We failed a lot. I was getting more resentful. My husband would say some old reckless stuff. And next thing you know, I'm like, but the one thing I didn't do, the one thing I did not do was emasculate my husband in public. Never, not into that. Don't do it. Anyway, so look, those are the lessons I learned. We had to do the work. We had to put in the work. So let me see if I can just recap. There were years I just couldn't stand this joker. Our kids were trolling us. Michelle Obama said that they were terrorists. There's times when you turn on each other for whatever reasons. I was resentful of a lot of stuff. I was resentful of a whole lot of stuff. And I think my resentment was also due to my insecurities as an independent woman. Okay. I wasn't making my own money. I had depleted all of my savings and stuff. And now I'm living off of my husband, which doesn't seem like much of anything to some people, but it meant a lot to me. And here I am. I should have just embraced it. And it took me some time. I'm not like everybody else, right? Like, let me rephrase that. I'm not that much different, but what I'm saying was it took me some time to embrace being vulnerable. I was resentful of the fact that people just saw me as his wife instead of as my own autonomous person. I was resentful, and actually, I think my husband too, of his time. He missed having that time, the freedom to do things. For example, my husband typically goes on a golfing trip every year now to commemorate in memory of his father. His father's been gone, going on 6 years. But he's not going to go this year because it's typically around the same time. Actually, I think they moved it this year, but it's typically around the time when my twins have their birthday. That had to be adjusted to like every other year. You know what I mean? We had to do a lot of things. We were resentful of all kinds of stuff, and we had to learn how to manage our resentment. We had to learn how to manage our own selfish desires because he got selfish in certain things too. Let me just, hey, it wasn't just me. Like he was on full clownery mode. Like I was like, dude, I need you to get yourself together. So anyway, what did I say? I said there's a time when we couldn't stand each other. The kids are trolling us / terrorists. We turned on each other. The thing was being in a partnership. Let me tell you, it's not always 50-50, but you have to have 100% effort. And then also learning that there's times when that's when you have to do the work. That's when you got to put in the work. And let me tell you, we failed a lot. Okay. So this is what I would say. I found that I had to really start putting in the work when we had these kids. Because when we were single, we still moved the way we wanted. When we first got married, we had one child, but we still moved. I wouldn't say we moved like we were single, but we didn't feel like it was that bad, like we still traveled. Like I was still traveling with my now oldest. Or if there were times like when he's hanging out with his dad, um, I would just go hang out with my husband. Like we'd be like, hey, let's just go to Vegas, or hey, come out here and visit me in the UK, or hey, let's see if we can get. But now it became a lot more difficult, obviously, once we had more kids, and we had to really, like get people to kind of like support us if he wanted me to join him in Japan or someplace, right? I think the biggest thing was we had to put in the work when we got these kids because our lifestyle changed, our finances were impacted, the way that we wanted to raise our children, the environments we wanted them in. Well, there's a cost to that, right? There's a cost in finances, there's a cost emotionally, there's a cost in um environment. Okay. There's just a lot that goes into it. Hopefully, if you enjoyed this would have been a great opportunity for you to subscribe. If you got anything out of it, this is a time for you to go ahead and subscribe. I say this because I am trying to put out content that's not the same salacious content. There's a place for the other stuff. And let me just say for the record, I enjoy some of it too. I just don't like to consume it all the time because I do believe many of the people who put out that kind of content all the time, where it's very negative about Black men, and don't get me wrong, they're calling out legit stuff. I want to make it clear. They're calling out legitimate stuff. But I personally cannot show up all the time on this platform and talk about the same kind of thing all the time. Like I just can't talk about that all the time. I feel like it's very poisonous. I mean, I see things for what they are, but I don't want my entire platform to be spent talking about why Black men are like evil or something. There's a lot of bad Black men out here, but there's some good ones too. I don't go around caping for them. I call a thing. But what I can do is say, hey, let me show you some other content. Part of shifting the paradigm of thought is to present people with alternatives. So instead of living in this space of, see, there he goes again, there he goes again, there he goes again, I want to be able to say, hey, look, these are your options. Why don't we talk about these things? Let's talk about health, maternal health. Let's talk about why we're not sleeping. Let's talk about why we should be paying for our children to go get an education. Let's talk about why Black men are now not going to school and we're promoting not getting educated. Let's talk about something other, like let's talk about why Black men seem to be going in on educated women. Is because they're not leveling up. Let's talk about the importance of travel. Let's talk about the importance of owning a home, generational wealth transfer, starting hedge funds. Let's talk about what it's like being middle-aged, knowing that you have to take care of your children and possibly take care of your parents. Let's talk about what it's like to enter a career field where you can earn high income. Let's talk about what it takes to become engineers. Let's talk about what it takes to become doctors. What are the pitfalls? What are the lessons learned? Let's talk about what it's really like to be an entrepreneur. And when you work for yourself, you don't realize how much taxes you really have to pay. Let's talk about, right? I just don't want to constantly come on this platform and waste an opportunity to talk about so many of the things instead of talking about hair, beauty, and why you're so mad at Black men. And I would say if I had to add a fourth thing, everybody's on a journey. Like I said, everyone's got the self-love journey, the mental health journey, the weight loss journey, the femininity journey, the soft life journey, journey after journey after journey, and we don't talk about the healing. So I rather say, hey, these are some of the lessons that I've learned. It doesn't mean that I won't engage in some of these other topics because I will, but I don't want that to be like the bulk of what I talk about. Because I feel like when you're constantly talking about those things, I also think it contributes to your psyche too. I don't like always being in a bad space. And these women that I hear who bring up great talking points, stuff that I've talked about with people many years, right? A lot of times people are having these same conversations. The only difference is they don't have a platform. The women who are having all these conversations are bringing up fantastic points, very smart, beautiful, just talented women. But I also hear a level of hurt and pain. There's no healing. I don't hear the healing. I'm not an expert either. So anybody who may hear this, they may try to take a shot. Just take the shot. I don't care. I'm going to let you take the shots, because the one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to fight with these women. Nevertheless, I want to offer up some alternatives. And there's going to be times when I'm going to talk about the same content. I just don't want it to take up the bulk of the time that I have on this platform. All right. So look, now that I've just yipped and yapped all that, don't forget to go ahead and leave me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. Tell me what you think. Do you want me to have a panel? Would you be willing to participate? I just want to say this before I go. I would love to have more Black women on my channel, on this platform. The issue is getting at least the people I know to show up. I can get Black men all day, every day, but Black women, it's really difficult, who are in my age bracket, to get them to show up and be present and to be willing to share and to mentor. I'm not saying they don't exist, but I find it really difficult. So if you're hearing this and you think that there's something that can be discussed, if you want to have a panel discussion on it, let me know. We'll figure out a time. I know I'm busy. We'll figure out a time. All right. Let me get on up out of here. Go ahead and subscribe, like, leave a comment, share it with everybody. Give me a thumbs up.